Hello, good afternoon. I'm Mark Watts and welcome to this LP Brussels session in the driver's seat, new trends and priorities for transport. It's great to be part of this major OPP IF2020 festival. And I want to thank everyone who's watching for joining us, and I hope you participate in the discussion later on. I also want to thank ECSA in particular for sponsoring the event and making this event happen. If I can, before I introduce our great team of speakers, just give you a few housekeeping points. Firstly, if you're using social media, the hashtag is IF2020. Secondly, we're running a poll throughout the session in terms of priorities. Please take part in that polling exercise that will run alongside this event on your screen. Thirdly, do use the session chat function if you have a question or a point of view, and I'll try as moderator to bring everyone in as much as I can, or at least to refer to your questions when we have the discussion. And finally, this session is being recorded and we will be releasing this via OPP on YouTube in the next few days. So welcome to the driver's seat, our amazing panel of EU transport superstars. Thank you for all sharing your valuable time with us at the IF2020 festival. You're one of a few hundred people participating today and dozens of speakers, so it's great to be part of this exercise. Just very quickly before we invite Matthew Baldwin to open up, just introduce everyone. We have Matthew Baldwin, who probably needs no introduction, but it's great to see you again, Matthew, Deputy Director, of course, of DG Move, Deputy Director General. Secondly, we have Martin Dorsman, the Secretary General of ECSA, the European Community Ship Owners Association. Welcome to you, Martin. Graziella Jost, who's the Projects Director for the European Transport Safety Council, ETSC. Welcome to you, Graziella. And we're still waiting for Monika Heiming, but I'm sure from EIM, I'm sure she'll be joining us shortly. In fact, there she is. Yeah. Monika, welcome to you, our final fourth superstar for this afternoon session on transport trends and priorities. So we look forward to hearing from our speakers and hearing to all of those of you who are listening in today. So if I invite you, Matthew, to perhaps set the scene and set out from your point of view, your views on trends and priorities. I know particularly you want to give a focus to urban safety as well. Over to you, Matthew.
Very much, Mark. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and lovely to see so many, not so much old, but friends. And it's a great pleasure to be on this webinar, which I gather is going to be the transport event at the Ideas Festival. In fact, someone was telling me the only transport event at this festival. So it's great to be part of that. And I know you want us to talk about priorities, Mark, so I'll try and cover that from the broad perspective of DG Move, but I also want to spend some time on my day job, if you like, as the EU's Road Safety and Sustainable Mobility Coordinator. On the big picture, then, it's clear that transport has been one of the hardest hit sectors in the COVID crisis. We've seen an unprecedented fall in transport activity and a lot of very disrupted connectivity. Freight levels, thankfully, haven't fallen off as much as passenger numbers, and a chapeau perhaps now to all of those involved, including the maritime and rail sectors represented here, for keeping the freight moving, including across borders. I don't know if you remember back in March, there was quite a lot of worry about panic buying and whether the supply of essential goods, essential foods and medicines was going to make it through. And I think because of the great efforts of the freight industry, consumers came to understand that essential supplies would get through. And this hasn't been easy. It's been a very big priority for our new Commissioner, Commissioner Verleyen, who's made her Green Lanes initiative a key priority to ensure that freight does keep moving. And I think she's been very successful in this, and with good coordination between member states and industry and, of course, the Parliament. And while the COVID crisis, unfortunately, continues to rumble on, we are now thinking about recovery. And that's our first priority these days, to ensure that transport plays its traditionally pivotal role in this recovery. You will have seen back in May the Commission's proposal on the budget side, including a reinforced long-term EU budget till 2027, and a really exciting, I would say unprecedented idea in the form of Next Generation EU, a 750 billion euro recovery instrument. And that's on top of the traditional transport spending, if you will, in the CEF, in cohesion, and so on. So I want to say a word or two about this. Over the next few months, member states will be putting forward their plans on how and where to spend this new money. For our part in the Commission, we're going to be steering them towards strengthening cohesion and resilience of the economy, helping job growth, and last but not least, supporting the twin green, digital, and green transitions. We and you need to ensure that transport is a big part of this 750 billion fund. I hope the transport industries are already thinking hard about what and where new spending is needed, and getting that message across to the Commission and to member states. So remember, it needs to support the green recovery, strengthen our resilience, help us boost jobs, and perhaps if I could add one more element, it needs to be capable of being done quickly. We can't hang around with this money. A lot of it has to be committed by 2022. So shovel ready is going to be another key motif. Again, I want to stress it's a huge opportunity. This can give us a great boost to the European Green Deal, and in doing so, to make sure that this recovery is not just more of the same old, and I'll say more about that in a minute. Before I do, Mark, a very quick plug, if I may, for our upcoming comprehensive strategy on smart and sustainable mobility, which many of you will know is planned for later this year, setting out the key transport initiatives for the coming years, not least to deliver what we promised, a 90% reduction in CO2 emissions from transport by 2050. Our new strategy in detail is, of course, a closely guarded secret at this stage, of course. But for example, I can tell you we'll be definitely looking at ways in which we can ramp up the production and the use of sustainable alternative fuels in the aviation and in the waterborne sectors, not least to meet our ambition of at least 1 million publicly accessible recharging and refueling points by 2025. So we'll also be revising the alternative fuels infrastructure directive, another go at the TEN-T regulation, and will be thereby laying, I hope, the foundation for a thoroughly modern, future-proof, climate-friendly transport infrastructure. So watch this space. Towards the end of this year, we will be out, I hope, with our new strategy. The other big priority I want to flag and put on the table, and I hope it fits well within this overall meta priority, if you like, of the green recovery, is this crucial intersection between road safety and sustainable mobility. A few words on both in the COVID context. We saw, as you know, big drops in road traffic during the COVID crisis, and a big short-term drop in fatalities, with 36% fewer people died in April 2020 compared to April 2019. And even if that turns out just to be a short-run blip, we should not forget that's more than 500 lives saved. But what we also know is that the decline in deaths was less than proportionate to the drop in traffic, which may say something about, I don't know for sure, drivers opportunistically speeding, for example, on empty roads. All of us in the road safety community have been a bit reticent about pushing the case for road safety during the crisis because COVID was drowning out everything, and we also didn't want to look like we were somehow taking advantage of this crisis. But as we start to come out of it, a few things I'd now like to mention. Firstly, despite all the horrors of COVID, globally, we are still probably going to lose, globally, in the world, more people to deaths on the road than we have lost from the COVID-19 virus, assuming that road deaths come in at the estimated 1.3 million worldwide. Secondly, our citizens, indeed, each and one of all of us, have accepted the really quite draconian and necessary measures adopted by public authorities affecting their lives and indeed their livelihoods. We have not seen public unrest at these draconian rules. We've seen, in fact, widespread public acceptance of the need for public action to save lives. You see where I'm going with this. Third, that necessary action against COVID has entailed huge economic costs to our sector, to society as a whole. And again, I'm not complaining about that here. Governments have done bravely what needed to be done. But I would like to point out that action to save lives on our roads, to increase road safety, means huge economic savings. Road crashes cost between 1% and 2% of the EU's GDP each and every year. Money spent on saving lives is unbelievably cost effective. And the good news is we now have a global agenda. Today, the UN website has available in all 6 working languages of the United Nations the new UN General Assembly resolution for a second decade of action on road safety. And that gives us the chance to try to restore some momentum to road safety that we've lost a bit during the COVID crisis. And finally, and I'd love to hear others' views on this, I think we're seeing some real signs that the public wants to see a different kind of mobility emerging from this crisis, certainly in the urban setting. For example, in Belgium, where we've seen a 45% increase in cycling, 20% of people saying they want to use their cars less, 70% of people want better bike lanes and footpaths, which in turn opens up some exciting new ways of reducing our overdependence on private carbon-fueled cars in cities, reducing noise, reducing CO2 emissions and air pollution and congestion, which together with the cost of road crashes amount to external costs of around 1 trillion euros every year in the EU. So again, as part of our future work, we'll be looking again at the urban mobility package, which dates all the way back to 2013 and is long overdue for an update. Mark, I should stop now. That's my final priority then, to tackle both road safety and try to develop sustainable urban mobility in the coming years. I don't think it's going to be easy. We just have to look out the window and we see a lot of car traffic already returning, possibly because people are still unwilling to use public transport. This is not a good situation, both in terms of sustainable mobility or indeed in terms of road safety. We need to do more to defend and support public transport. Let me stop there. We live in what the Chinese would say are highly interesting times. I have the sense that things are going to change pretty rapidly. And I actually believe we are headed for a positive evolution in terms of sustainable mobility and transport as a whole. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to joining the discussion in a bit.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew Baldwin there, for a barnstorming opening act, which I think sets out a whole range of opportunities for the transport sector in addressing the challenges, but doing it in a way that I think is full of optimism in terms of the future if we grasp these opportunities now. And that's why I think we've got such an interesting panel today representing rail and maritime sector, as well as, of course, our important friends from ETSC on the safety side, to try and see how we can build forward that green, sustainable, resilient, safer recovery for Europe. Thanks for those of you who've just joined. We've got over 50 people now tuning in, so welcome to you all. Just a quick reminder on the housekeeping points, if I may. The hashtag is hashtag IF2020 if you're using social media. We'll poll during the session to ask you what your transport priority is, so don't forget to participate in that poll. There is a chat function we're using beside the screen. Do put your comments in there and we'll make sure they're reflected in the discussion. And finally, this session is being recorded. If I can move on to the next speaker, it's a great pleasure to invite Martin Dorsman, the Secretary General of ECSA, the European Community Shipowners Association, to now both respond to Matthew, but in particular, Martin, to outline your views on the important role shipping will have to play in ensuring we have a sustainable and economically robust recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Over to you, Martin.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I would like to start with a few figures on the importance of the shipping industry and also on the EU shipping industry. If you look at EU's external trade, 76% of all external trade of the EU is going by sea. So products like energy, food, medicine, raw materials, consumer products, it's all transported by sea. If you look at EU's internal trade, 32% goes by sea, short sea shipping we call that. And short sea shipping ranks second immediately after road transport. If you look at the size of the European ship owners control 40% of the world fleet, providing jobs to 2 million people and contributing 149 billion euros to the European economy. So I think that gives a good impression of the importance of shipping globally and the importance of EU shipping. The challenge European shipping is facing is especially to maintain this share. There's a lot of competition from outside the EU, So the main challenge is to safeguard the strong position we now have as European shipping industry, but also as maritime cluster, because European shipping is a very important part of the European maritime cluster. And together, for example, with the ship builders, the engine manufacturers, the manufacturers of technical equipment, we can challenge and find answers for the green transition. So it's very important that that cluster remains strong, and we need all those elements. Matthew already said a few words on the impacts of COVID-19 on the shipping industry. Indeed, passenger ferries and cruise vessels were immediately hit, with passenger volumes dropping to zero. But also specific cargo trades, for example, car carriers were extremely hit because car manufacturers closed down the factories in Europe. Overall, we expect a negative effect on shipping, of course, because of the slowdown of economic activity in Europe and globally. And the recovery is uncertain, of course, depending on how the COVID-19 pandemic will develop. It's not going in the right direction in the last couple of weeks. So I think the shipping industry will face difficult times, and an industry that was hit extremely hard in 2008, the financial and economic developments, and the shipping industry did not yet fully recover from that. And then we had COVID-19 coming in. If you talk about the trends and priorities for shipping, Matthew already mentioned, of course, decarbonization. Decarbonization of the world fleets and of the European fleets is of course crucial. And I think the good news is that industry and regulators, we are united if we talk about the goals we want to achieve. We want to decarbonize as quickly as possible this century. I think the main discussion is about the best way to get there. We are a global industry, so the strong preference of the industry is for the global regulator, that's the UN body, the International Maritime Organization, to regulate the industry. That leaves, of course, room open for the EU to also help support that work of the IMO. We have specific ideas about it. If you talk about the scale of magnitude, there are over 60,000 vessels sailing worldwide. It's a very diverse fleet, ranging from vessels 3,000 tons of cargo to 400,000 tons of cargo, passenger ferries, all kinds of different types and size of vessels. So there's no silver bullet to achieve that full decarbonization. For example, for ferries, short sea, small distances, the smaller ferries, batteries can be a solution, fuel cells can be a solution, but for deep sea, ocean going, that's not a solution. So we need global regulations. The Green Deal announced to include shipping in the EU ETS. It's up till this moment only a political statement. We don't have a very strong position on it because there's not yet a proposal on the table. We are concerned, however, about strong pressure from the European Parliament about using the money that is raised by the EU ETS for the recovery fund. So the proposal is to have 10 billion euros per year raised from the aviation and shipping industry to fund the EU recovery fund. And we are worried because in that way, the EU ETS is not an instrument to actually help the industry decarbonizing, but it's only an instrument to raise money. And if the EU ETS would be an effective instrument to decarbonize the industry, then the funds would not be available anymore for the EU recovery fund. So there's a tension in that there are several goals attached to one instrument, and that doesn't work. The EU initiatives that Matthew referred to about alternative fuels infrastructure, we of course are very supportive. It's crucial. But at this point in time, the alternative fuels are not there yet. There's still a long list of possible fuels, methanol, ethanol, synthetic LNG, synthetic LPG, bio-LNG, etc., etc. The industry is working very hard to let me put it this way, to find the fuel, or perhaps fuels that will be available for the shipping industry globally. So that's a global challenge. And we, as industry, are also willing to contribute to that research and development. So if we look at challenges for this development, then I already mentioned the political pressure on the EU ETS, the role of shippers. It's still that shippers are not really wanting to pay for greener vessels. They want to hire, of course, greener vessels, but for the price of, let me say, a gray vessel. It's changing, but slowly. So the big global shippers are now making the step, but we need a much stronger incentive from the market that ship owners are rewarded for becoming green. That would be a great help for the shipping industry. And another challenge is that we are dependent on other stakeholders, such as the engine manufacturers, the shipbuilders, the fuel suppliers. And that's why I made the reference to the maritime cluster. We need to do this together to decarbonize. The second trend and priority is digitalization and automation for the shipping industry. It's not a new thing. It's happening already for decades. Shipping is being automated and digitalization is happening. For example, we now have the electronic sea charts on vessels being updated automatically via an online connection. So it's ongoing, but what is new, of course, is the use of artificial intelligence, and that will change things. There's a lot of talk about autonomous shipping. You have different levels of autonomy, ranging from seafarers monitoring systems on board a vessel towards fully autonomous vessels navigating on artificial intelligence. There are several advantages attached to it. For example, it can improve environmental performance. So the link between digitalization and decarbonization is there also for shipping. It can have a positive effect on safety. It can increase the quality of work by making the job more attractive. And it also can increase the opportunity for women to work in the sector, because part of the work of the seafarer can move to shore. It can be done in shifts from an office, so that can increase the possibility for women. We as a sector, we have to work on the gender balance, so we see this as a nice opportunity to actually work on. There are, of course, conditions attached to make these advantages happen. For example, it's crucial that seafarers are being trained to use the new possibilities. And of course, there has to be a business case for ship owners. Sometimes it's presented as an opportunity they can't refuse. But of course, they need to invest in it. The new systems require maintenance, so there must be a business case. And another condition is that the regulation has to be flexible. So here's also a role for the EU, that the regulation is flexible, that it's goal-based. For example, the job of the seafarer will change. There are now specific regulations on watchkeeping also in the engine room. That has to be changed because engine room can be monitored online by the engine manufacturer. Okay, that's for me for this introduction. Thank you very much.
So much, Martin, for that very comprehensive overview of the contribution that shipping must make to our economic and green recovery, but also how important it is to keeping trade and goods flowing in the meantime, as well as you say, those challenges in Europe in terms of the maritime cluster, over 2 million jobs, I think you mentioned, but also you're part of a global industry. You provoked a number of questions, I see, which is great, and we look forward to returning to you, Martin, during the discussion. But for now, thank you very much, Martin. It gives me a great pleasure to now turn to Monika Heiming, the Executive Director of EIM. And it will be great to hear, Monika, your views in terms of what Matthew said a bit earlier, but also the critical role played by European railways in contributing to our green recovery. Over to you, Monika.
So thank you very much, Mark. And also thank you very much to Martin and Matthew. So very interesting times indeed. So I heard with great interest that we have a lot in common with the maritime industry, both in terms of digitalization, new fuels, hydrogen fuels, batteries, although we are only physical infrastructure on the ground. So we are the Association of Rail Infrastructure Managers. That sounds a bit less sexy than train operators, but without infrastructure, no train operations. So we represent roughly 50% of the European market in terms of rail infrastructure. So we have 16 members in 11 countries. For the little story, Mark, we have now more than 4 members from the UK. So due to Brexit, despite Brexit, both are true. So, and what are our big challenges as rail infrastructure managers? As COVID showed, keep the system going and whatever it takes. And so it is in interesting times that you can see how resilient your market or your business is. And what was really hard for us was the unorderly shutdown of borders. And so Commissioner Valian was very brave in putting forward green lanes, both for road and for rail, and that helped us keep serving the national economies with the supplies you needed. But we have to not think that once COVID is over, everything is fine. The next crisis is always coming along. I'm not a pessimist, I'm rather an optimist. I like to be prepared. So what are our big challenges as rail infrastructure managers? So we spoke about the recovery, about the changing mobility patterns, about alternative fuels, innovation. So although we are European rail infrastructure managers, we are not let's say, uninterested in geopolitical issues. So what's going to happen? So we have a few very interesting initiatives on the agenda of the EU, which is the new transport white paper, which is due to be published in early next year. And so what would we expect to be in it to help also the Commission and us as a sector to have a great future in terms of mobility? For us, for example, is multimodality. It's not the main topic, but it's an important one. So how do we create, let's say, a multimodal transport system in the EU which is resilient? What do we mean? So we have to have a better resilience across the different modes for the next crisis. That is one thing. The other crisis is also a financial one. So we have the recovery fund, but what's coming beyond? And how much money will be left for the classical funding instruments like CEF? CEF transport is for us the main turf, which is for the infrastructure, physical infrastructure, and we have CEF digital, which is, for example, the rollout of 5G. That is very important. These are our main tools to bring by innovation in the sector and remain competitive. We have the revision of the 10T guidelines. That is also something very, very important. So how green will be the next 10T guidelines be? That's quite important. For the moment, I see a little bit of an attempt to have a sort of internal key performance indicator. 30% of the next projects under the of INEA, whatever it's called next year, shall be green. So how green will it be? Do we manage to have a internationally recognized green taxonomy? We need that. That is a top, the bottom line, to have, let's say, also a Green Deal that is that becomes a reference on the global level. So for rail infrastructure managers, it is quite important to have, let's say, a solid framework, because our planning phase is much longer compared to other actors in the rail sector, but also in other sectors. So when we roll out, for example, a European signaling system, we are more than 20 years, we're talking more than 20 years. This is simply because the networks are so long. So what would I like to give as a message to Matthew? So thank you, Matthew. I had a great time with you when you were a bit more busy with railways. I regretted that you left, so I'm missing you somehow, but I'm also working greatly with your successors. And I think that rail infrastructure, be it in an urban area or a regional area or a national area, can make a great difference to changing mobility patterns. When there is good infrastructure and infrastructure available with good capacity and smart and interconnected, I think we can make a really, really, really good contribution to the smart and green mobility of the future. And I hope you agree with me.
Thank you so much, Monika. And a few challenges there to Matthew. Time for him to respond, but really setting out, as you say, Monika, the importance of infrastructure to Europe's economy and a green and smart recovery. But loads of important points there that we probably won't have time to do justice to, but things like taxonomy and others. And these are crucial points in the debate that we need to be addressing in the run-up to the publication of the Commission's new communication that will replace the 2011 white paper. So thank you so much, Monika, for setting the scene from EIM's perspective. If I can now turn to Graziella Jost from the European Transport Safety Council as the final speaker in this round. It's an absolute pleasure to have Graziella on this session, not least because I think all of us, all panelists, I'm sure most of the people watching this all believe passionately that we need to do more to try and address road safety in particular. I mean, for example, it still shocks me. Matthew gave the figures globally, but I think Europe last year, over 22,000 people in Europe lost their lives in road traffic crashes. It's appalling. And I think we all very much are looking forward to hearing you, Graziella, outline what your priorities are for the weeks, months, and years ahead. Over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Can you see the slide?
Yeah.
Yeah, super. I'm Graziella Jost. I'm working at ETSC. We are a road safety non-governmental organization. We represent in Brussels 60 members across the EU. And I live and work in Brussels, and this is how Brussels looks like 365 days a year, 64 days a year. This street is the heart of Brussels. This is also where a lot of EU functionaries are working. And you can see here lots of space for motor vehicle. On the side, very narrow infrastructure for pedestrian and cyclists. Well, at least there is an infrastructure for pedestrian and cyclists. But many cities in Europe look similar during peak hours, and most of us live in city. You said, 40% of road deaths in the EU happen in urban areas. And this is because cities face multiple and often conflicting evolutive challenges. So road safety is not always the top priority, and we recognize that. But by being a road safety champion, city can also reduce pollution, congestion, and increase quality of life. And this is how my city, Brussels, look like one day a year on a car-free day on the Rue de la Loi, the same street as the picture above. I'm wondering, on which road would you like to walk and cycle? On which one would you feel safer and have the impression you breathe fresher air? Well, I think there is no doubt that the picture on the bottom is the one where you feel safer and where you are safer. 70% of those killed on urban roads are vulnerable road users, be it pedestrian, cyclist, or power two-wheeler riders, so motorbikes and motorcycles. So we have to stop building cities for cars and start building cities for people. This graph shows the road hierarchy, or the road user hierarchy that we would like to promote. So you have pedestrians at the top of the priority for city planners, and cyclists are responsible for the safety of pedestrians, public transport. So bus and tram drivers are responsible for the safety of the cyclist and the pedestrian, etc., etc. So the biggest motor vehicle, like the good vehicles, are responsible for the safety of all the others. And cities can be road safety champions, and by being road safety champions, they can also tick a lot of other challenges that they are facing. So as cities, they can be more flexible and go beyond and above national or EU legislation. They can adopt their own road safety strategies and targets based on safe systems. So the safe system approach is based on the idea that we as a human, we make mistakes. Errors are human. So the system needs to take into account that humans make mistakes and should build protection for those mistakes. So basically, if you're doing a mistake as a road user, you shouldn't be killed or killing someone or be severely injured. Cities can also adopt and secure a budget for road safety. And we see a lot of cities actually implementing, for example, 30K zones supported by appropriate infrastructure. Safer infrastructure also for walking and cycling. And they can also be championed by buying safer vehicle. Half of the fleet, motor vehicle fleet, is owned or bought by public authorities. So they have the power of being the market for safer vehicle. Let me give you an example of a city in Poland, Jaworno. It's a city of 90,000 inhabitants near Krakow. And we've seen in this city since 2007 massive improvements in road infrastructure. The city has invested 140 million euros in road safety since 2007, so it's over a series of years. 26% of that budget was coming from EU funds that they managed to get. They had to apply and secure, and they could use it for road safety. So there are EU money that you can use for road safety measures. And 36% were coming from national government and 28% from the municipal budget. So by 2018, they reconstructed 30% of the city streets, and they've seen impressive results. So trips by car decreased by more than 30%, and they have managed to have 32% of all trips in the town done on foot and 28% on bike. For 2.5 years, they have seen 0 deaths. And this is how the city looked like on the left, and on the right, how the city now looks like. So more green, less space for cars, but much more for walking and cycling. And so this example that we give in a lot of conferences for us is a sign of hope, because you don't need to live in the Netherlands or Sweden to benefit from nice infrastructure. It's possible to change cities everywhere in Europe. I also want to mention that last year there was a great piece of legislation that was passed at the EU level. It's the new General Safety Regulation, we call GSR, that sets the minimum safety standards for new vehicles that can be sold on the EU market. It makes a package of road safety technologies mandatory for all new vehicles as from 2022. There are different dates for different technologies. So the first dates are kicking in 2022. And part of the package are 2 very important measures, including intelligent speed assistance and autonomous emergency braking. Autonomous emergency braking means that the vehicle that you will be driving will recognize cyclists and pedestrians and brake in case you are not taking any action. And intelligent speed assistance, ISA, means that the car will support drivers who want to respect speed limit to know what the speed limit is on the road that you're driving. So here on that road, it's 40 kilometers per hour, and the car is equipped with camera reading signs and can recognize the signs on the side of the road. Show it to the dashboard of the driver, so the driver is aware that it is limited to 40, and the car will either reduce the speed smoothly, or just increasing the force that you need to push on the accelerator pedal, so for you to recognize that you are driving at the speed limit. The The technologies that are made mandatory by the EU are overridable, so the drivers that don't want to respect the speed limit can still do. But most of us actually want to respect the speed limits, but it's easy to miss the sign. So this package of road safety technologies that are becoming mandatory will save 25,000 lives and more than 140,000 serious injuries over 15 years. So if we could have a magic wand and have those technologies fitted next year already, we would save all the people that were killed last year in the EU. 25,000 people were killed, and it's exactly the same number of people that can be saved by this package. And cities can already actually ask for these technologies to be fitted to vehicles that they are buying. And so if you want to know more, here I link to a PIN publication, which I've presented a few of the findings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Graziella. Road safety is obviously going to be one of the top priorities, and quite rightly so. There's a big challenge there ahead of us, and thank you for setting the scene there and what also practically can be done with the new EU regulations coming in as well in the next year or two. Hopefully will make a big difference, but we've got to keep up the pressure. Do vote in the poll, please, if you haven't already participated. It's clear everyone on the panel, I think, is painting a very different picture of transport going forward, much greener, much safer, much more digital. There's a massive lead at the moment on the need for a shift to rail, sea, walking and biking, cycling, and I think we'll all probably, many of us would share that sentiment. We've had a number of questions in, and we'll try and do justice to them as best as we can in the limited time, as always, we have available. We'll take them in packages, so I'll try my best to package them up. We've had a couple of questions really on, well, firstly on maybe for Martin, but others may want to comment, but perhaps Martin goes first. You could probably see the questions as well on the screen. But one, how can we achieve harmonization of global regulations on emissions, CO2 for shipping? But also there's questions there about how we can use maybe instruments like taxonomy to encourage people like ship brokers, ship owners, and the financial sector to encourage a shift to greener shipping. And there's also some questions on things like maybe turning to Matthew next on things like the Green Lanes Initiative and having a contingency plan in the case of future crises. So perhaps if we take Martin first, if you want to address those points about how can the EU act with best effect globally to promote a harmonized approach to green shipping.
Yes, thank you, Mark. In my introduction, I already mentioned the work that is ongoing by the IMO. EU member states are member of the IMO, and the EU is coordinating, of course, the input from the EU member states towards the IMO. And I think it's very important that the EU plays a very proactive, ambitious, but also constructive role in IMO. We think that's the best way to ensure that the regulation will be there on time, and also making sure that EU ship owners have a global level playing field. At this point in time, the IMO is working on short and medium-term measures. The industry is coming forward with concrete proposals to reduce emissions even further, also in the short term. We have a long-term reduction goal up to 2050, but we are not satisfied with that. We also want to achieve real reductions on short-term and medium-term. So as industry, we work very closely together with member states, also EU member states, and also, of course, with the European Commission to make sure that the IMO can take real decisions also this year. It was quite complicated, of course. Some very important meetings of the Environmental Committee were postponed. There's now a meeting scheduled for the end of November. And also as shipping industry, we really urge the IMO, so all the member states there, take decisions, take meaningful decisions. We have to continue reducing our carbon emissions. So that's, I think, for the IMO in the EU. If the EU would take steps that go quicker, let me put it that way, than the IMO, it will be crucial that IMO regulations will be designed in such a way that they can be incorporated at a later stage at a global level. That's one thing we are thinking of. If the EU would move before the IMO does, and the EU regulations should be designed in such a way that it can be incorporated at a global level. So that are two remarks on that topic. Then on the taxonomy, it's a crucial discussion also for shipping. We are now working very closely with DG Move on definitions for shipping in the taxonomy. I already mentioned the fact that we are facing competition from non-EU. It's very important to keep ship finance in Europe. If ship finance would leave Europe, and we already see it happening, China is very willing to take over, but they have their conditions, of course. If they would finance European ship owners, then the condition is, of course, you have to build in China. So, and the ownership is outside the EU, and that's very worrying. So yes, we are supportive of the EU taxonomy discussion. Yes, we want to have definitions for shipping, but once again, we need to be sure that we are not losing out to China. And then a last remark on green lanes. The biggest topic the shipping industry is now facing, if we talk about COVID, it's not only about economic performance, but a very humanitarian question that's about crew changes. At this moment, over 300,000 seafarers globally are working on board a vessel for over 11 months, some 15, 16 months without any break. They can't be relieved because of limited flight connections globally, testing requirements, quarantine requirements, but also Schengen visa requirements by EU member states is still an issue. So we are in a close and very intense dialogue with the Commission. What can we do about it? How can we make sure that seafarers are relieved? We are very much afraid that trade will be impacted, that supply chains can be can't be secured, and that's also safety is in danger, and the well-being of human seafarers. So that's, for this moment, a crucial topic for the shipping industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you in particular for highlighting that humanitarian crisis that ships' crews are facing globally. As you say, over 300,000 people literally stranded. Hopefully, we can continue to help you highlight that situation. If I can move very quickly to Matthew, there's a specific question, as you saw from Marco, regarding a future EU contingency plan. I'm sure we've all learned lessons, Matthew. The Commission were and DG Move in particular, were very quick to move in and operate the green lane system, thankfully. But are there other things we can now do and build into a contingency plan for the future?
Yes, thank you very much for that question from Marco. Also a question from George I'd like to pick up briefly. But could I just begin by responding very briefly to what Martin said, which was very constructive and reasonable. And I'd like to begin where he left off, entirely endorsing what he and you've said, Mark, about the horrific situation for the seafarers. We're really wrestling with it. We're working very closely with Martin and the ship owners and the other players. And it's really distressing, frankly. These are some of the poorest people come from the poorest countries in the world, and they're stuck and they're kind of forgotten about. And the more I think we can try to bring publicity to their plight, the better. So thank you, Martin, for everything you've done, and we'll continue battling away. It is extraordinarily complicated because you immediately get caught up into the whole visa questions and the border questions, and quite a lot of course, people's concerns about COVID in terms of letting people home. So it's very complicated, but it doesn't remove the moral imperative that we sort this out. I also wanted to say, very much hear what you say, and thank you for expressing it so reasonably on the whole emissions question. You're right to talk up the level of ambition, given the 13% of emissions that come from the maritime sector. And I do want to assure you, you know this well, Martin, but to assure people listening in, that we are not trying to play golf with one club here. We are looking at a comprehensive and ambitious set of policies across the board. We're calling it the basket of measures, and not the basket case, but the basket of measures, bringing in a number of different things. We do believe that the EU ETS can play an important part of that basket, but it's not the only thing. By the end of 2020, we'll come forward with a proposal to try to ramp up, for example, the uptake of alternative fuels and maritime transport. And we entirely follow your advice, Martin, in terms of the role we plan to play at the IMO. I think you used the words constructive and another
Ambitious.
nice adjective, but I want to reassure you, ambitious, yes, and we'll do both of those things, and to try to use the coordination mechanism we have and to work closely with the member states and really try to get stuff done. But sorry, I don't want to take more time because I thought what you said was very reasonable. On Marco's question on the green lanes, and thank you for it, it's very timely because pleased to say the German presidency has picked up this particular baton and are saying, you know, let's see if what we need to make permanent in terms of our crisis management. The days of March and April were pretty crazy days. I've never seen anything quite like it in my career. I was coordinating the contact points for the transport contact points throughout the different member states, and I have to say the overall level of cooperation was superb. Really, people sharing information, but people taking very rapid decisions, and frankly, sometimes the lack of coordination was a real problem. The rail industry knows well about the need for contingency plans. We've looked into that, as Monika knows well, after the famous Rastatt incident. And I think we need to think of examples like that so that we can be better prepared. I'd love COVID-19 to be the last epidemic of this kind that we face. I suspect it's not going to be. It might be something completely different. And we need to find a way of strengthening our resilience and our ability to react. So once again, the German presidency is working hard on this. There'll be discussions on this at the Transport Council coming up later this month, and let's see how far we go. I don't want to talk up too much about what precise model we're going to go down, but I think George, you're absolutely right that we need to do something. Our plan is to keep the green lanes concept going, which has worked extremely well. I'm the exact figure in front of me, but I think more than 90% of freight is crossing frontiers by road with less than a 15-minute delay, which, given the circumstances and the different border closures across Europe, that's quite significant. Briefly, George asked me, but also Monika, a question, and the bit for me, I think, was whether or not the MFF would be in place by the end of the year. And I can deliciously slide around that question by saying, well, it ain't up to me, Gov. We've made our proposal. It's now in the hands of the Council and the Parliament, and Parliament's working hard on it, but I'm hearing that trilogues will be taking place both on this and on the recovery fund not before November. So it might be a bit tight, but we do want to get on with it. Again, the recovery fund, we're asking member states to come forward with their draft plans by September, late September, and their definitive plans by April. So that's tomorrow in terms of the way we work within the EU. And once again, I really stress the need for the industry, the rail industry, the maritime industry, the sustainable urban mobility industry, everyone to think through what they want from this fund and to make sure they meet the conditions for getting their hands on the dosh. Thank you.
Matthew, on a very positive note to end on, and very helpful setting scene and responding to other points. So thank you for that. Lots of things for us to follow up on. Monika, if I can bring you in now, but conscious of the time, we're very keen to bring Graziella in as well, and we want a final minute each of everyone with a concluding remark. But Monika, do you want to come in quickly on that point that George made about the carbon border adjustment mechanism? And you're on mute still.
Fine. On the carbon border mechanism, it's not an easy issue. It's like this many other things. There is pros and cons. I don't have a glass bowl. I would quite support it actually, but it's not up to the rail infrastructure managers to have a weighing factor on these negotiations. That depends a little bit also on the member states and how they will agree with that. And there's also an international aspect to it. So it's for me also a trade issue. So let's see what's going to happen. But for me, I would like to thank the Commission, as only Matthew, so for the great effort during the crisis, so for the coordination, for the green lanes, for the recovery fund, for the MFF. I know you're doing a great job. It's not so easy, and I know the difficult thing is square the circle. So do more with less. So with less money, and I am quite aware of that, and we will face a very interesting, challenging negotiation, for example, under the Horizon Europe the next EU research framework program. We need innovation across all sectors, but some will be more winners, others will be a bit more the losers. So from a rail perspective, I can only say, give us the money. So that's more or less my closing remark.
Thank you, Monika. A sentiment I'm sure we will all echo and endorse.
Shameless. It's like a highway.
Railway robbery. Tony Barclay, are you trying to come in? I don't know whether Tony's able to join us. A special guest appearance from Tony Barclay is a board member of the European Rail Freight Association. Welcome. This is a belated arrival of another transport superstar. Welcome, Tony. You have a very brief question, Tony.
Well, a very brief question. Lovely seeing you, Mark, and Monika, and you, Mark, and thank you for inviting me. I've got a very simple question, really. Wonderful speeches we've heard. I didn't hear Matthew, I'm afraid. But COVID's caused massive changes to the economy, to our way of life, and everything like that. And isn't the answer that some of the changes must stay as a radical permanent solution, whether it's freight or passengers or whatever? And I think the days of expecting to go on holiday to the Balearic Islands every year at a very low cost, or traveling around the world, or eating avocados from Israel by air every year, they're finished. We've got to end up with a system that makes the cost of transport related to the Green Deal, I think. And you're going some way towards that, but I hope you go a bit further.
Thank you, Tony, for basically doing, as I would expect, my job for me, because you've basically given the opportunity for everyone to have their final minute, including responding to Tony Barclay's point. Some of the things that have come out of this awful pandemic, should they stick? Should we be more reliant on more sustainable modes of transport? Should we be traveling less, particularly on the more polluting modes? So if we perhaps start off with Graziella, and then we'll work our way around with Matthew having the final word in the remaining 4 minutes we've got, responding to Tony's point and any other priorities in particular that you want to highlight. Graziella.
Yeah, I agree with Tony. Well, what we've seen during the lockdown were more people cycling and walking, and we would like that to continue, of course. What we would like to change is, of course, to have more people using public transport and regain confidence in using public transport. But if you don't want to use public transport, well, then walk and cycle instead of getting in your car, which might be, of course, the easiest solution. So, we can see the crisis as a wake-up call for more priority towards cycling and walking. During the pandemic, though, we've seen, as Matthew mentioned, less deaths, but not to the extent of less traffic. So people were actually using the empty streets to speed. And this is why I wanted to focus on how crucial is speed management, so that we can actually offer a safe environment for people to choose to walk and cycle. One thing also I would like, it's nice to be in a panel with people from the railway and the maritime industry, which is quite rare. And as one of the road safety measures is, of course, to just reduce motor vehicle and road use. So if we could have less trucks running up freight and more freight on green trains, green ships, trucks are responsible for 25% of all road deaths. So truck drivers are quite safe. They're not killed themselves, but they're actually posing a risk to others because it's actually the truck design that we need to change, and GSR will also allow for better truck design, so more visibility. But there are opportunity for change, and the coming months will be interesting indeed.
That was great. Monika, then Martin, then Matthew, you got your minute.
Okay, 1 minute. So for me, urban mobility is not the only side of the coin. You have to look at the business travelers. So how much attractive will become the night trains for business travelers, for example, on distances more than 200 kilometers? So that will be a real big challenge. And we'll have to look into how to look at what aviation offers and what rail can offer and is willing to offer, and within which time horizon. That's my take.
Thank you, Monika. And again, I'm sure there's sentiments there that all of us would applaud and support. Martin, for your final minute.
Yeah, a very brief remark about decarbonization. Once again, to stress that the industry is committed that we are working very hard together with the regulators at a global European level. So perhaps one can say, well, it looks all sunny, but there's a dark cloud at the horizon, and it's called the EU ETS. So depending on the proposal and the way that is taken forward, we might have to become a little bit more critical than as reasonable as I was this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Indeed, this debate, I'm sure, is going to continue. Matthew, final word.
Martin, I promise I won't report you as being reasonable in this conference call, if that helps.
It's recorded.
Really loud and clear on maritime ETS. Great to see you, Tony. Typically brilliant and provocative question, if I may. And I want to slightly row against my own tendencies and the tendency of this panel in replying. We have to remember that transport is a huge industry employing, I don't have the number, gazillions of people. And it's crucial in terms of the amount of freight and the passengers it moves. And I don't think any of us, if we're really honest in our heart of hearts, want to say, well, you know what, we just have to stop moving. We need to keep mobility, we need to keep the freight flowing and everything else. So the question then becomes, can we do this in a more sustainable way? I profoundly believe we can. The European Green Deal must be our new growth strategy. But I stress that we need to be able to continue to move the volume. We can't say to people, you're no longer going to get to go to places. And my strategy for achieving that, sorry, I used to be more modest. Our strategy for doing that is indeed to use the market. Let's internalize those externalities. It's not about banning cars from city centers or banning people from taking airplanes. It's about those true external costs being met. If we can meet the externalities, we will tend to be taking more trips by train. Good news, Tony, good news, Monika. We will be using those. It will be less obvious to fly particularly for those short trips. There will be more night trains. There will be more bikes on trains. So let's have the confidence in the market working to ensure this new growth strategy, this new European Green Deal can come to fruition. I'm an optimist. Thank you.
Matthew, we're all optimists, which is why we're all on this panel of superstars, transport superstars. Thank you, one and all, the four who were invited, and Tony Buckley, who invited himself, but with good justification. I also thank all the audience. We've had a lot of interest in this, all the questions, all the comments. Hopefully we've tried to do justice to them all. This debate will continue because we all believe with a passion that it's absolutely important, essential for transport to be at the very heart of our green recovery. And not forgetting, of course, it's got to be safe too. Thank you, everyone. Look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.